On the Shoulders of Dwarves, a weekly podcast about role-playing games. Hello and welcome to episode 36 of On the Shoulders of Dwarves, a weekly podcast about role-playing games and the gamers who game them. My name is Eran Aviram.
And I am Uri Lifshitz. What's up?
Do you see how I made Uri say it? Because I ended my sentence and then there was this space, this gap, and then Uri had to fill it up. That was railroading.
I see what you did there.
Today we'll be discussing railroading, but subtle railroading. And we need to start with some definition, because railroading, the act of sort of placing the players on a flight plan, or, railroads, which is where the metaphor comes from, has some bad connotations. It is a word that when you say it, it is usually meant as a pejorative. You want to say, this is a bad game. It is railroaded. So if you think this way, let's instead talk about tour guide. The GM is a tour guide taking the players on a tour. I actually enjoy a different metaphor. I like the theme park metaphor, where we say that there are lots of rides to go around, and the players, once they go on a ride, will have to go through the entire ride and get out the other side. And the ride is pre-planned. There's only one way to go through the roller coaster, for example. But that's fine. And we all did it because we want to, and we are expecting it to be a one-way direction. And it's cool with all of us. This is the sort of thing that we are talking about here. And also, specifically, how to make the players do things and go in a specific direction in a very subtle way, that they will not even realize what is happening.
I prefer actually the Bond metaphor, saying that, if you go and see a James Bond movie, you pretty much know what's going to happen, okay? You know that James Bond, he's going to be on a mission, there will be some great success, and then there's going to be a worse mission, and he's going to be betrayed, and then he's going to get back and catch the villains, and the girl's going to fall for him, etc. This is pretty much as railroaded narrative as you can imagine. The template is always there and always the same. However, we do enjoy the movies because the question is not, will he succeed, but how?
Yes.
We're in it for the experience, not for the surprise, shall we say.
When I start let's say, Pathfinder Adventure Path or a D&D 5 campaign, I am in for the ride. I want to see what was designed for me, what is going to happen, and I want to go through it. I am doing a very conscious decision to go for the ride. However, there will be players that will think that, especially in this episode, Uri, things that we're talking about that are subtle, that are maybe the players are unaware of. There are players who will see this as sort of, I don't want to say cheating, but evil manipulation, as the GM enforcing something on the players, as using psychology tricks in order to make people do things. And if you are that sort of player, I encourage you to do two things. First, listen to this episode. And second, always discuss this sort of thing with your GM. It is important to talk about this thing and bring it up to the forefront. So even if you, the GM, don't actually go through all of the tricks, and these are tricks, we are going to talk about tools, things that you can use as a GM in order to make things happen in the game. These are not at all, I think, different from any other tool we've discussed before, but you should at least make it clear to the players that they are being used. Am I wrong about this, Uri?
Yes. I think pretty much all of these tools are hints. There are subtle hints, ways to sort of guide the player to a specific narrative. However, pretty much none of these 7 tools, which I'm going to discuss, is a strictly, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to discuss 8 tools, which one of them is number 0. Number 0 is brute railroading, and the other 7s are in ascending level of subtleness. Some of them are pretty much invisible, and some of them could be blunt depending on how you implement them.
So let's just start it. Let's just go through them and see what happens.
Excellent. So before we're going to start, I'm just going to say that this whole episode is based on a workshop that I taught a week ago about subtle railroading. We mentioned it in our previous episode. And these tools have one specific goal, and that is to get the players to make a specific choice without imposing it on them, to subtly getting the players to make their own choice that you want them to do. I have developed these tools because I like two things. Number one, I like having my adventure pre-planned so that the player can do whatever they want in any order whatsoever. However, I acknowledge that sometimes it's better to go through route A first rather than route B for an experience point of view. So a lot of time I would try to fudge the group to go in a specific direction, but give them the final saying on everything. I'm a great believer in the fact that the players should have the final and ultimate agency on what their characters are doing. However, if I can assist their experience, and that's how I view myself as a GM, I am the one creating and delivering the experience, then why not? So here we go. We're going to start with rule 0, which is brute force railroading, also known as fast forwarding, also known as a cutscene, also known as a walkthrough or statement. Now I'm going to select a very simple example throughout this list. There's a branch in the road. The players could choose either to open the door on the right or the door on the left. We want them to open the door on the right. If we're going to do fast forwarding, it's going to look something like this. Okay, so there's a branch in the road. There are two doors, one on the right, one on the left. You open the one on the right and you find yourself in the room. The room is decorated, blah, 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 blah. I did not give the players any option. That's why it's called option 0. It's fast forwarding to where the action is. It's the cutscene. Cutscene is something taken from computer games, if you're not familiar with it, where you reach a certain point and then you no longer control your character. You see a small cutscene, a movie, or simply text that tell you what happened next until you can control your character again. This is the most low-level form of railroading. I would highly recommend to never use it except if you want to really fast-forward something.
I actually have something to say about it, Uri, because I think it's an excellent way to start a scene. And I'll give a link to an article I've written about it, because in my comics up to 4 players, Nadav, the GM, is doing exactly this as he starts a specific scene by saying you approach the mansion and open the door. By this, he doesn't give them a choice. He doesn't say, well, you see a mansion, what do you do? Because then they will probably start saying, well, I want to sneak around it. I want to, ambush everyone walking outside, because there are players, and players automatically think in all sorts of paramilitary sort of mindset.
I completely agree, but bear in mind that the ranking here is by order of subtlety. This is the least subtle way of railroading.
I'm not completely sure, because I think that none of the players in that example realized what was happening by him saying it. But I'll give a link to...
Unless one of them gonna start saying, wait, do I have time to cast spells?
Yes.
No, I want to get a map of the town. No, wait, before we knock on the door, I'm casting magic missile against the darkness.
Completely true. Completely true.
So you fast forward that. You prevented them from making these choices. You railroaded it ahead, which is fine, but very not subtle.
I'll give a link in the show notes. Let us continue.
Of course. Our first option is the negative reinforcement. You reach a branch in the road. There's a door on your right and a door on your left. Me, the GM, wants you to pick the door on the right. So I'm going to give some sort of a negative reinforcement to the door on your left. This could be in play. For example, if I know the party is injured, I could say, oh, you hear some growling from behind the door on your left. In this case, I'm basically give some sort of a negative reinforcement to the idea of going on the left-hand side. The idea of negative reinforcement is simply to encourage the players to pick something other than what you don't want them to choose. This could be indication of a battle. This could be simply, the door simply said library. If I know the group is a hack and slash party which is not interested currently in the history and of the setting, I could make the door on the left to be anything which I think they will find uninteresting or scary. This, of course, stands in opposition with number 2 on our list, the positive reinforcement. Pretty much any indication that the door on the right would lead to something the party wants is an excellent way to get them move forward. This could be a plaque on the door saying the name of the person they're looking for. This could be simply a more ornate door. This could be a door that propel the plot forward in some way. This could be, okay, you hear the sound of coins being counted on the other side of that door. What do you do? Option number 3 is called consultation/delay. And that is basically a way to get the party to be more, what's the word? Not enthusiastic toward, more...
wanting to do a thing?
Yes, wanting to do a thing, more interested
motivated.
And I do that by consulting with them about that specific thing, and thus they're getting more interested in. I call it consultation/delay because sometimes if I don't want to consult with my players, I consult the rule book. For example, you reach a fork in the road. There's a door on your right and a door on your left. The door on your left lead onward to a door, and the door on your right, let me just check it with the book, just a second. It's green and leading westward. What do you do? Now, simply the act of checking the rule book will usually tip off players that, there's something on the right, and the GM doesn't want to forget exactly what. He's taking the time to consult the rulebook to make sure about the color of the door. That is important. A lot of time I would also pretend to try and remember a specific detail or a word describing that door or that option, and that would usually kind of focus the player's attention on that. Even a simple delay when describing the options or giving the players time to react would usually do the trick. There's a door on the right-hand side. It is currently locked by a seriously looking metal bar. Anything? Okay, and the rest of the room is more, as simple as that. It's a very small trick, the consultation/delay, but it's amazing how much it focuses us toward a specific something.
This works very well in Powered by the Apocalypse games, where the mere fact of not saying something, not because you omitted it, but because you just stop for a moment, stop the conversation, is almost has ramifications in the rules. Because you can do a move as a GM when the players are looking at you, waiting to see what happens next. So, for example, if I am explaining something and I stop for a moment, I signal to the players, are you maybe wanting to do something here? No? Okay, I'll continue. And because the conversation is so important, the rules of the conversation are so important, it's a really big deal.
Yes, and even if it's not codified within the gaming system, psychologically, it works very well to focus all the attention.
Yes.
We're on to number 4 on our list, which is an oldie but goodie. It's called Schrodinger's Dungeon. If you're not familiar with Schrodinger's cat, go look it up. We're not going to discuss it here. But Schrodinger's Dungeon is basically a situation in which whatever choice you're going to make, you're going to reach to the same final option. For example, you reach a fork in the road. There's a door on your right and a door on your left. unbeknownst to the player, both doors lead to the same room. Or one of them lead to a room and the other one to a hidden door leading to that room, for example. The end option is always the same. I'm familiar with Schrodinger's dungeon from I can't remember where it was, where someone said, okay, so I planned this goblin ambush in the forest and my players are standing on the road, and I said, okay, do you want to go to the forest or do you want to go to the cave? And my player said, to the cave. And I said, cool, there's a goblin ambush in the cave, roll initiative. And one of the players said, okay, so what if we would have gone to the forest? He said, cool, there's a goblin ambush in the forest, roll initiative.
I think it's quite important for the players not to realize that they just went through a Schrodinger fork in the road, because I would feel cheated, personally. Unless
you did, and you should.
Unless it's the sort of thing that is an event that is happening anyway in an event-driven adventure. Like, for example, if tonight the rebels are going to attack the temple anyway, because this is what is happening tonight, then that's fine. And it doesn't matter what I choose to do before that, unless I somehow stop the rebels, of course. It will happen. But in this case, you actually, in a way, moved the goblins through time and space from where they were supposed to be. And I'm doing air quotes because they weren't supposed to be anywhere. They were only where the players are going to go to. And they were always there. But unless you convince the players that this is fair and the world can exist without them, and this is an actual immersive sort of place, you will break, for me, my suspension of disbelief.
Indeed. It's very important to not overuse this, and if you can't use it in a very subtle way, don't.
Yes.
However, I do know a lot of people who take this as a basic rule for dungeon designing, in the sense that there's a lot of different options, but most of them would lead eventually to the final conclusion. It's a very easy technique to get the players to feel as if they're in a much, much bigger space than they are. Imagine, for example, a dungeon where between every two rooms, there's a branch in the road, and both options are leading in some way to the next room. The player will 99% of the time only pick one of them and then reach the room and then move forward. And they won't be aware that half their choices actually did not lead to any other location. But it does give a very strong sense of wide space, big maze for the players, for the characters to travel in.
We should probably do some episodes sometime about the illusion of agency, but for now, I'll probably just give a link to Extra Credit, which is an excellent YouTube channel that probably a lot of you guys already know, but if not, I'll give a link. They have actually a lot of videos discussing this concept, yes.
Agency is important. Basically, what we're doing now with railroading is taking away agency from the players.
Which is why I said the illusion of agency, because I think it's even more important than actual agency.
Is true. Number 5 is one of my all-time favorites. It's called RailRolling. It's basically when you ask a role for the sole purpose of railroading the narrative. For example, you walk along the corridor. There are two doors in front of you, one on the right and one on the left. Can you give me a perception check, please, when you move next to the one on the right?
15!
Exit. You don't hear anything.
Okay.
What do you do? Even though nothing happened, the fact that I asked for a roll when they were next to the door on the right would insinuate there was something to be heard for the door on the right.
Yes.
I like to use rolling a lot. I like to use the mechanic to my own advantage. If I want the players to feel they're being haunted, I simply would ask for a lot of perception rolls, and I will not give any extra information. This gives the players the sense that they're missing something, which is exactly what I think the character would feel.
Yes.
when they're starting to get paranoid. So using these rolls, now they can be, like I said, empty rolls, which means you roll something, but you don't get any extra information. Or I can use the extra roll to give more information, which in turn would make it a lot more, shall we say, enticing to pick the right option. Okay, you reach the door on the right. It's a stone door. Does anyone have stone cunning? No? Okay, so no further information. However, the players already know that there's something special about that stone. And if someone have stone cunning, then maybe they should roll that, and I would give them extra details about that door, which would make it even more interesting. I also like the name RailRolling.
Yes, that's really nice.
Moving on to number 6. Number 6 is the best tool the GM have to do anything.
Yes.
It's called Guiding Questions, and it is simply the act of railroading the attention of the player to a specific something. It could be as simple as you're walking down the corridor. There's a door on your right and a door on your left. Do you open the door on the right? Now, this is a very in-your-face question. Do you open the door on the right? The players could say no. The players could say yes. However, you did not ask them anything about the door on the left. The question now discussed around the table will usually be, should we open the door on the right or shouldn't we? It's not which door to open. You have minimized the range of possibilities in that specific instance by phrasing that question the way you did.
Yes, usually when I do this, it's not because I want the players to choose out of two options. It's because I want them to go in a specific way. This is really, really a sort of a tour guide sort of thing to do. I say, well, you wake up in the morning. Are you going to the government offices? And now they must either answer yes, and then excellent, or no, and then
they would have to invent a new option and then choose it.
Yes, and it will have to be in some way relevant to the government offices. I mean, does it have to be? But it's quite likely because now they are thinking about it. Right, yes, we need to talk with the governor. Well, let's not go and talk with the governor, but we should then spy on them. Nice, excellent. Something with the governor is now happening. This is what I wanted.
Also, if they're doing something which is not meeting the governor, it should be more important than meeting with the governor. Because they have like a default option now, which is meeting the governor.
Yes.
If you're doing something else, you need to justify it.
Yes.
Which is fine. It's awesome. Could be, okay, I want to go and study new spells, so when we meet the governor, I'm going to have the ability to resurrect him after the barbarian will inevitably kill him by mistake.
Ouch.
But, you know, it's more important. It has a justification, and it's going to make the game more interesting.
For me, I must justify it to myself. This is what you mean.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, you give this question usually to a specific player.
Yes.
If I'm going to ask this, okay, there's a wooden door on your right. So, Jane, do you check for traps? That's like a fundamental question, assuming Jane is the rogue who usually check for traps. And notice how the left-hand door has disappeared from the conversation. I mean, the rogue is not going to say, no, I am not looking for traps. That's her job in the party. It's assumed that we are fast-forwarding this. However, we do give the options and the choice over to the player and the illusion of them making the choice to go ahead through the right-hand door.
This is something that also happens in real life a lot in marketing. It's called priming. When you present an option and now everything is compared to the option. In my mind, I can't stop thinking about the option, the thing that you said. Anything else you'll now say will be compared. So if I say, so do you want to buy this thing? It costs $5. And I say, well, okay. And then you say, oh, you can buy this thing. It costs $3. Okay. I'll buy the thing that is $3. But what if I didn't want to buy anything at all? Well, this is $3. It's cheaper than the $5. I had the 5 in my mind. It was pretty awesome, the 5, but I can buy it at 3, so I probably should buy the 3 now. The other option is not buying at all or buying something else entirely. But you only presented me with one thing and then something to compare it favorably. So now I want the second thing because it's better.
Indeed. You also learn that a lot when you're devising polls.
Yes.
The phrasing of a question will usually guarantee an answer of one kind or the other. That's why pollsters are actually a big deal. To create a neutral form of questioning people for their opinion is very, very, very difficult. Right up to the order of the questions and where do you put the emphasis on,
yes,
and what sort of leading questions. So it's a nifty little psychological trick, and most GM would use that even, unintentionally, simply because they want to propel the game forward. They know there's a trap. They want the players to check. They want the player to go there. They will simply ask. And asking is a lot of time setting the answer up.
Yes.
We reached number 7, our last, final, and most subtle way of getting the players to do something. That option is specificity or extra details. When I'm describing something, every extra piece of information that I give you on that specific something would make it more interesting. That is simply because that the more specific case is a lot more interesting than the more generalized one. So if there's a door on your right and a door on your left, and a door on your right have finely carved runes that seem to be dwarven in origin, dating back to the Second Empire of Turan, and you can quite easily see that the door was once magnificently carved and adorned, and nowadays it is filled with mildew, and most of the carving are brushed away by the small passage of the centuries. Giving those extra details would probably make every player say, oh wow, that's interesting. That's the equivalent of a slow motion or a zoom in on an object in a movie. You get a lot of extra time to really look at that and say, oh, the camera stays a lot of time on this object. It must be important.
There's something here that is very common, and everyone playing or even watching anything ever is very much aware of, which is called the law of conservation of details. It's from, obviously, TV tropes, and I'll give a link in the show notes. But it basically means that because we are short on time, if we are to describe something, we are giving it importance. So the more details that you give is the more positive reinforcement that you give, and the other way around. If I don't want him to go to the left, I will simply skip how interesting it's supposed to be. There's something that I want to say as a summary, or maybe before we get to the summary. And that's about the player's perspective. As a player, when I'm a player and I sense that my GM is doing one of these things on me, is using a tool, one of these tools, or some other tools on me in order to try and guide me in some direction, the correct thing to do, if I trust the GM and I think that this is a ride that I'm willing to go on and I think I'm going to enjoy it, is to simply roll on with it. It's not to point at it, say, this is the thing that has been done, and even if not in a cynical way, just saying, you want us to go there. No, be kind. Just go there. Just roll on with it. Emphasizing the meta aspect of it will only, I think, reduce the immersiveness, will probably hurt in some way your suspension of disbelief, and might make your GM crunch their nose in a sort of way, because maybe they're thinking that this is pretty awesome and they really do want you to go there. So instead of saying, you want us to go there, you can just go there. As a GM, I've been using most of these most of the time, even in a very open campaign like 50 Fathoms, which is half sandbox. I mean, the players can go wherever they want, but I know there are places that are cooler and I try to guide them there. And I know that there are times where they should probably go somewhere because it's better to be there now. It's better to do this thing now for the story. It will be a better story. And they trust me. So they go along with it. I don't know if they are aware of these tricks when I use them, but it doesn't matter. It just happens. And I would highly encourage everyone to re-listen to this episode if need be and go with it. Do this.
Yeah, granted, this is an episode more geared toward GMs, but players, just because you know the trick, you understand what happened behind the curtain, doesn't make it any less exciting.
Oh, completely.
For me, I think of it as the general sense of the world. Now, as a character, there's a lot of things about the world which I know. I know that this port town is going to be more exciting than that city. I know that the door on the right seems more ornate, more glamorous, more interesting than the one on the left. As a GM, I can't always describe it in a satisfactory manner. Sometimes I'm just thinking, okay, I know that what's going to happen in this place is better and more interesting than what's happened in this place. And I want to convey that general knowledge of the world that the characters should have to the players. And I don't want to break the immersion by saying, yeah, things that happen in New York are generally more exciting than things that happen in Poughkeepsie. But I'm not going to say that to my players. I'm just going to say, well, New York is very interesting this time of year and pretty much any time.
Just think about that person sitting in the cinema, and when some sort of cinematic trick is happening on screen, points at the screen and says, they've just did this and this. Was this more fun for everyone involved? Because I don't think so. I mean, if you are here for the enjoyment of the story, of the game, of this experience, be part of it. Don't point at it. You can talk about it after the session as much as you'd like. I think it's be cool and excellent and great for everyone involved if you do so, but not during the session.
Yeah, it's like when you start studying cinematics and writing, and you see a movie, and all of a sudden you're, they use a jump cut there. That was a great dissolve. The editing here is amazing. And if you've watched the same movie before, you study all that. You're just, cool movie. The fact that you know how it's done doesn't make it any less impressive from my perspective. Again, because instead of asking yourself, was it fun? You're asking, what was the level of mastery in which it was done? And that's a question I'm always up for, because it's something you can learn so much from.
And with these wise words, we shall end this part of the episode and continue on to take the load off. In this part of the show, we talk a bit about role-playing games in our personal lives. Uri, what have been going on with you this past week?
Yeah, this past week, I've talked with a lot of people about a lot of stuff role-play related. And, there's an old story about a rabbi who would end every day asking himself, have I added to the sum of goodness in the world? And I kind of feel the same way about role-playing. I think that's the reason why me and you are recording this podcast, because we genuinely believe that we have things to say that would make other people's game better.
Yes.
And more enjoyable.
Yes.
And I'm in a lot of Facebook discussions and Twitter talks, and it amazes me how many people would oftentimes simply diss other people and other people's idea and crush plans and be very rude to new and unexperienced players and GM.
Yes, that's very unfortunate.
And it's just heartbreaking. I think if we all end our day with asking, have I added to the sum of awesome role-playing in the world? And the answer, no, is perfectly acceptable. In most days, most of us are not making the role-playing world a better place. However, if once a week, once a month, you can say to yourself, wow, I have made someone game better. I have taken an idea that someone had and I improved it. I've got someone more enthusiastic about his next role-playing session, then you have done something awesome. And the opposite of that is something I think we should ask ourselves after every Facebook discussion or Twitter talk. We should ask ourselves, have I caused someone to enjoy his game less? Have I caused someone to think her idea was worthless? Have I lowered the amount of fun in the role-playing world? And if I had, I shouldn't have. I think it's a good rule to judge discussion by.
Well, after that, what I have to say is not that important. But I do have something happened to me. It's just less wise than yours, but it's fine. It happened. So I'm playing Savage World 50 Fathoms, and my player just arrived at a city, Kirea, which we decided is very German for some reason. Now, my players have some interesting things to do, and some of them require downtime of like 3 weeks, but they are somewhat tense. They are unsure that they want to spend these 3 weeks. So while I started the session with a lot of subtle railroading, going with, so you spent 3 weeks, what do you do with your time? Instead, they always stopped me and went back to the nitty-gritty of the tiny details of what we do now this afternoon as we arrived, because they are tense about some things. So I decided to try and untense them, try to relieve the tension by throwing at them the biggest villain that they've met so far at the end of that session, and they'll fight him next session. And then I think they'll feel relieved. They say, okay, the worst thing that could have happened. Now we probably have 3 weeks to rest. So I think I hope so, that might help in some way. And that's not exactly railroading. I was trying to think throughout this episode if I can place this somewhere. It's not exactly railroading. I'm not sure what it is yet. Maybe pacing, which we have an episode on. I'll give it in some show notes. I don't know. I hope it will work. Let's see next week.
Well, nothing's better than, after careful consideration of something, just to try it out.
Indeed. Yes. And if you guys just tried out this episode, then welcome. Hello. You can go to dwarfcast.net where you can try out other episodes. We have several, 36 by now, actually. If you're listening to the future, we might even have more. You can listen each Monday, because each and every Monday even, there's a new episode. And if you want to tell us something, like, for example, send us email, which we received like 2 in the past 2 weeks. And thank you guys, but continue sending more. Do so to show@dwarfcast.net. Tell us what you think about what we said. Suggest new topics for conversation. Ask us a question about something very specific that happened in your game that you're looking to maybe have a different point of view about. Also, you can check us out on Facebook, where we have an active group. Yay. And on Twitter, where we have an account. It's Twitter. Yay. And it's @dwarfpodcast in both of them. I think that's basically it.
Yeah. Also, kudos for the people in Australia, because in the last 2 months, we have started seeing a lot of people from Australia starting to listen to the podcast, which is awesome. Give us an email to tell us what you think.
We shall now end the episode by each of us saying goodbye in their native language. להתראות. On the Shoulder of Dwarves is shared under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial form. The intro and outro are taken from Silly Fun by Kevin MacLeod. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution Free. Find us at dwarfcast.net and follow us on Twitter or Facebook.